Yep, welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I am Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me we have some more RPG horror stories. Speaking of RPG horror stories, I realize I have some RPG horror stories of my own. I might share them at some point, but I want to make sure that Mary and Micah are there for that sort of thing, because their input in these sort of stuff kind of matters, because Micah was there for most of it, and Mary was there for a good chunk of it as well. And my memory is not that great, I only have an intelligence of 10, but I want to make sure I have somebody there to get the record straight, so I'm not just talking out of my butt. Anyway, before I talk more out of my butt, let's get some RPG horror stories for today. D&D horror story. This happened several months ago, so I'm sorry if some of the details might be a tad fuzzy. It was a campaign, still ongoing, where the DM is a paid DM in a pretty cool open world campaign, Dramatis Personae. DM as the DM, Warlock 1 as friend of DM, Warlock 2 as side character, Warlock 3 as another side character, Fighter, side character, Ranger, problem player, Bard, side character. The campaign took off in a small village that had a trade issue with bandits raiding shipments. They met in another town and found the wanted ad and decided to get together and head out. The ranger was a non-binary character, which wasn't an issue, but the other players kept forgetting to call the ranger they them, and it started wearing very hard on the player mid-session 1. The DM kept reminding the players, and they did try, but they weren't used to it. The GM suggested that the player put the pronouns in the character name for their VTT, virtual tabletop, and it seemed to help a little. After about session 3, the red flag started flying very high. Main character syndrome was very evident, and the ranger would mention multiple times what other players should do with their characters during combat and would talk over people constantly. Do not do that. Don't tell people what they should be doing, either in combat, out of character, in character, whatever. Don't tell people what they should be doing as their characters. Focus on your own character and let the other players focus on theirs. Ranger would also do that laugh that the stereotypical Achille would do. I would have an almost constant "I'm smarter than everyone, including the DM" attitude. After a few sessions, the DM messaged all the other players in the group and asked if they had any issues with the ranger, but they all unanimously wanted to give them more chances and said there weren't any issues. It turned out that the DM saw a lot of issues with the ranger, but he felt that as it was a paid game where players were playing him to run the game for them, he didn't want to remove a player from the campaign that the other players said they had no issues with. Players were being way too nice for their own good. Honestly, I feel like they should have been more honest about the ranger. The ranger also ignored rulings that the DM had made regarding item interactions and such, and went with their version of how the book said it went. When the player would ask the DM for a ruling on an action, the ranger would jump in, even if it would be interrupting the DM, and tell them what the rules were. And they would tell the DM that he ruled wrong if he said something against it. The thing is, the ranger was insanely intelligent with random ideas, and it got the group out of multiple issues. But things started coming to a big head when one of the players got a vision while traveling in a cave of the bandits and saw the life of the leader for the past few weeks and saw that they were actually tricked by a magic user and enslaved. And the leader was killed by a wizard and then charmed the rest of the tribe with a large rune circle. The players were shown in the vision where to go to talk to the ghost of the dead leader, and the player told the group. Everyone but the ranger decided to go to where the vision showed, and the ranger called it an obvious trap. The rest of the group went ahead and talked to the ghost and decided to help the tribe by trying to kill the wizard and break the enchantment. The ranger, hearing all of this, said they were going to set a trap and have a held action to shoot the first person who came around the corner that the group went through, claiming that it was a trap to get them there anyway. I asked if the held action was any of the other enemies, but the ranger said they didn't want to wait to see who it was, and they would let the arrow fly. So the warlock, who is a friend of the DM, came back to let the ranger know there was no trap and they had faulty information and were actually killing innocents. The ranger let the arrow fly and almost one-shot the warlock. The warlock then told the ranger they could go screw themselves and said he was going back to the rest of the group. The ranger, out of character, said this wasn't a group for them and they couldn't understand the ranger. Yeah, because ranger's so misunderstood, a little being paranoid and shooting a fellow player, a fellow party member, just because they came around the corner to be like, "Hey man, it's good, it's all clear." Ow, what the fuck, dude? Why'd you do that? They can't understand my broodiness. They can't understand my utter intelligence. Actually, DM, my character is the best one ever, and everybody doesn't understand my character because they're so stupid. The misunderstood ranger or problem player. Of course, the characters is misunderstood, It couldn't be the character is just an idiot or some kind, or just a murderous psychopath. The player is definitely not at fault, totally not. It must be the other players, must be the DM, the player. The problem player is just so misunderstood and mysterious. The warlock said that what was said was in character, as a party member refused to go with the rest of them and that almost killed him. So of course he'd be pissed off. The next session, the group went to the BBG battle, and the ranger, who always had oranges with them, used some of the juice to help destroy the ruining circle with their body that were a reskinned Yuan tea. Oranges? I don't understand. Is it like a reference I should understand? Then he did some more of the I'm smarter than you and I'm going to do something and I'm gonna call you dumb if you have to Google it to see I'm doing scientific stuff. Oh, wait. Was it trying to use oranges to create like a cleaning solution to like scrub out the the runes or something? D&D or TTRPGs aren't like math and logic and science. It's rules and mechanics within the world that the DM allows to happen. You can't just create orange pledge cleaning solution to scrub out the runes. Just don't try. Unless the DM says that's fine. I don't know, maybe you could like sweep it off with a broom or something. You don't know. Maybe these runes aren't that difficult to like take away. They finished the adventure and we're about to go to the next. The DM did travel in skill check per day for shorter trips and had different players pick skills to use. He had them done in a way that you can use any skills as long as you can make it make sense. And you got bonuses for how well you were able to describe it. The ranger did them all, and they even did one day by rolling insight on the ground. All the players and even the DM were checked out with the ranger by now, but none of the players would say they were having issues with the ranger even though the DM asked again. The next session, the fighter said he wouldn't be able to join that week, and the bard ended up saying in Discord that he was quitting because the ranger was talking over everyone and wouldn't let players play their characters and had to be the center of everything, etc. It also turned out the fighter said he couldn't show up that way because he didn't want to play with the ranger anymore and didn't want to say that out loud. The bard ended up leaving, but then the ranger left, saying that they didn't want to be there because of others not having fun, and left, telling the DM to watch out for the bard as the ranger felt he was showing severe main character syndrome red flags. The bard ended up coming back and it continued. Unfortunately, the other warlock had already been burnt out from everything and wasn't able to recover and give it a chance without the ranger, and left as well. The good news is, the campaign went from almost being torn apart to continuing still today. And after a couple of people who didn't stick around for more than a single session each, the party got a paladin with a brain as insightful and randomly shooting out great ideas as the ranger, but without all the issues that came with it. Well, I'm glad the story ended pretty well. Thank you so much for your story submission. I'm glad things went well though. It sucks that players weren't able to speak up ahead of time. I feel like things would have been much easier resolved if players were able to speak up early on. Please, if you're a player at a table and DM is asking if something is different or something could change, please don't be afraid to speak up. It's much better to talk about these problems out in the open than to have to deal and tolerate with it for it to just get worse and worse and worse. So please, as a player, please don't be afraid to speak up and give your feedback. A very unique Mercer Effect D&D horror story. Hello, I'm going on 8 years D&D 5e DM, playing in 3.5 era, skip 4th edition, and started DMing a few years into 5e's lifespan. And this is the tale of the most uniquely run in with the Matt Mercer effect. For those unaware, that's where someone expected to be able to DM like a paid professional voice actor. I'm not a paid DM, nor a professional voice actor. I run a beginner-friendly game of D&D. Speedruns you from 1st to 5th level over several sessions with increasingly difficult fights. I've only ever kicked 4 players in my time, and this was the most unique. Names and classes not mentioned just to keep things simple, because frankly, they don't matter for this story. I'd done session zeros with everyone and helped them make their character sheets with an editable PDF. I use Roll20 for maps, and I have player provide their own images for their characters, or I offer to just grab a picture off Google search to represent them, getting their approval of the image, until they find a picture they send me. The problem player mentioned she was inspired to play by watching Critical Role. Not the first time I'd heard this, and it's not a red flag, but it does explain her later difficulties. She was very descriptive with her character and her backstory. I tell everyone backstories are not really relevant for this game, as it's pretty set in stone what will happen, but I find an image for her a few days later, and game starts a few days after that on the weekend. If it's a beginner-friendly game where you just kind of dip your toes in just to practice D&D, probably best not to write too much. Leave all your best writing for like a full-on campaign. So we're starting session 1. Everyone's ready in voice chat, and our problem player protests that I never send her the character portrait. I'm confused by this, as I did send her the image I'm using for her via Discord, grab it off of Google search, and she approved it. I have Roll20 up and her token is right there with her able to move it around. asked her what she meant, and she explained that she expected me to pay for realistic, full-body pictures of all the players' characters because Critical Role has them for each player. Ma'am, you playing a free game that somebody is offering to run for you? If you want to commission your own artwork for your character, that's on your end, okay? You shouldn't be expecting your DM, especially a stranger, whip you up and commission you a full-on, full-body picture. Do you know how much that stuff costs? I've artwork of characters that I played in VR chat roleplays, and I gotta be honest right now that artwork for that stuff is not cheap in the slightest. I was really into the characters and I really enjoyed the roleplay and stuff, so I commissioned anyway. Plus, it supports an artist that I really like. But to have it for a beginner-friendly game, for a free game you joining with a bunch of strangers, like if she wants to commission her own artist that she finds to draw her character, fine. But don't expect your DM to do that for you. DMs aren't there to do this for you. It's not a paid game or anything like that. It's a free game you're playing. I think she was under the impression that the bust portrait I used for a character was just a small part of an entire image. I explained to her that kind of character portrait is expensive, and I never said I was doing that because I don't have that kind of money to throw around. She left the call after I said that. Either she got really mad and she dipped, or she got really embarrassed that she asked something like this. I just felt awkward and just removed herself out of the situation. Thankfully, nothing too dramatic. In the Discord she and I both in never seemed to be made aware of this little spat. Or if it did, it never reached me or the other players. Game and fine. One player died due to some very poor rolls against the final boss, a modified shambling mound, but I haven't heard from that girl since, and frankly, hope someone got through to her and she got to play the game. There's nothing wrong with wanting to play D&D or try D&D because you saw it in Critical Role, but don't expect your DM to commission you a full-on art piece for your character. There are a lot of artists you can find on. Actually, you know, I gotta be honest, there are a lot of scam artists out there right now on Twitter. My friends are constantly getting Discord messages and Twitter messages from people that steal other people's artwork and just scam people away because they say, oh, look at the commissions that I have and all the stuff that I can do. Look at the stuff that clearly is not the artwork, and basically try to convince them to like commission art, but instead the art never gets commissioned and people just run off with the money. Don't do it off of random Discord users or Twitter, X, whatever users. Ask your friend for an artist reference, or ask your friend of a friend for see if they can recommend a credible artist. If you get a random message from a Discord user or X user and they like say they do art commissions and stuff, and if the first opening statement or opening phrase is to try to get you to commission them, check back the reference and make sure they have actual artwork displayed so they're credible and not just stealing images. You can use that using the Google image search. Either way, a very peculiarly interesting Mercer effect. Alright, next story. An advice to others: don't be like me. I gotta share this, even if it's probably not truly a horror story. Still good advice for everyone else. It's more of a vent than a coherent story, but I need to do it, because maybe this way I'll be able to finally put it behind me for good and forget it all. I'm tired of being sad over this. Diana, it's great to see you again. Go ahead and vent away, queen. I'm ready for this. I previously told a story about me playing a campaign with an online group. That one about one incredibly unlucky tiefling. Well, that story still haven't continued, but we've been going through different ones. I'm not going to mention anything about Curse of Strahd, since nothing truly horrifying happened there. It was pretty chill, especially considering that it was run by a first-time DM and yet another player of our group, third one at this point. This story is about an original campaign by our first original DM who ran the very first game for all of us. This story is a sequel to the original campaign and was meant for high level, and by the end we would already be level 20, and we started with 17 if I remember correctly. Whoa. It was, in comparison to a pretty light and classic Lich adventure of the original campaign, a hardcore Lovecraftian epic in which we would have to defeat old ones and open or seal something dangerous. It was also tied to both the campaign in which one of our other players played with the first DM ran previously, and to our first campaign as a group, and from the very beginning it wasn't going well for me. I was pretty unlucky in the beginning, and being the only halfling without any ability to fly was gimping me compared to others, but it was never really a problem being a war cleric with a magic melee weapon that tossed projectiles and stuff. What was the problem is that I just did not fit in, I guess. Since the very beginning it didn't feel right, and with more and more sessions it would get worse and worse for me. And in turn, I'll be playing worse and worse, speaking less and less, doing less and less, just not really engaging, while everyone else was having fun and being interested in it much more in comparison. The one especially aggravating aspect in my eyes was the combat. I'm going to be honest, I despise combat in general, and I don't like doing it in pretty much any form of TTRPGs. It's not fun for me. It wastes a lot of precious time. It restricts RP. Yes, I know that you can still be very creative in battle, but in comparison to everything else, it's not even a comparison. And God, it's so boring to do, to wait for others, for DM, for anything. On top of that, being in a group, I'm getting severely afflicted with social pressure and anxiety, and I have a lot of trouble picking the right option for my turn, making the combat go even slower and annoying others as well, which only makes me more anxious and pressured. And unfortunately, the group as a whole, but especially the first DM, love combat and is specifically known for making up different and supposedly fun battles, but I can't even appreciate it due to my sheer hatred for it. That's quite a problem to have. Have you considered maybe playing a different type of TTRPG that has less combat, more social interactions? I hear Vampire the Masquerade is more social intrigue based than it is combat, but I could be completely wrong as I've never really played it. That's just what I heard. If you dislike combat in general, maybe it's about the specific type of combat or like the choice paralysis that you experience that you dislike. Maybe playing something a little bit easier or something a little more straightforward like a fighter would be way more fun for you. Heck, even a Hexblade Warlock, I recommend that. It's very straightforward, very easy, very fun to work with. And you don't even need to know much about spells because probably you're not going to be using spells as much as you're going to be using melee combat. Or you could play as a rogue. Rogue doesn't seem to be overly complicated, at least now that I think about it. I think it's more about stealth than it is really in combat, but I suppose having to deal with advantage and disadvantages can also be a complicated thing. Monk is pretty easy as well. I mean, for the most part, I just punch a lot, and that's about it. There's a friend of mine that tried playing as a bard, and she was brand new to D&D, and the choice paralysis for her of knowing what she should be doing as her character, that was difficult to watch. So when she remade her ranger, I went ahead and worked with her to make sure she is fully aware of what her ranger can do and what her abilities are, to make sure she's aware of the options she has and everything she's able to do when it comes to doing her abilities and playing her character. And now she's enjoying it way more because it's a little bit less of a complicated class. For the most part, she just sits in the back, shoots a longbow, and her little Drake companion is able to bite stuff on the butt. But either way, I'm rambling right now. Let's keep going with the story. Let's see what else is here. Of course, this campaign also had a lot of battles. I would say it was like 45% combat, 45% honestly pointless, boring, and just not fun exploration. And I do love exploration, but this wasn't it in the campaign, with 10% at most relegated to socializing, my favorite aspect of roleplaying, the one I excel at, and which is just the essence of roleplay for me. Granted, I'm a grown-up theater kid after all. The game obviously was not for me, but I did not realize that at the moment. I did not really realize that until the final session I was in, where it reached the peak of bad for me, when all I could think of was, God, how many sessions till the finale? I was barely engaging, even when the DM was trying to prod me and do something, but I just did not have any willingness for anything at this point. I barely spoke. I was clearly sad and disinterested, and even other players noticed this and would chew me out for it after the session when I finally spoke out about my grievances. Okay, hold on. If somebody is dealing with stuff and clearly look like they're disinterested at the table or something's going on, don't chew them out over this whole thing. Maybe sit down and talk to them or something. Figure out what's going on. Maybe something's going on in their head. IRL. Something is distracting them from enjoying the game. But you don't chew people out about it. That sucks. At the same time, maybe it would have been good to listen to your feelings early on instead of just sticking out through it. Maybe you're the kind of person that doesn't quit. I'm the kind of person that doesn't quit sometimes, and I will stick around for stuff till the bitter end for whatever reason, when it probably would have been easier to just listen to your heart, listen to your mind, and listen to your wants and desires. And if this game is not part of your wants and desires, probably would have been good to just quit early on. All of this could have been avoided, you know? I could have left the game earlier, much earlier, and everyone would be happy. But I didn't. Because of my misguided, I don't want to betray everyone else by dropping out thought, because I want to keep hanging out with the others since we barely do that outside of games, because I'm so used to just enduring things for the sake of everyone else, even if I'm suffering. Not realizing that I'm making things worse for everyone since I'm pretty much checked out of it. Worrying about others is one thing, but you making worse for yourself, please. If you're out there and you're playing a game that you're not genuinely not enjoying, but you're playing for the sake of your friends, or you're doing any activity at all that you genuinely don't enjoy, but you're doing it for the sake of others, reconsider stepping back from it. Because at the end of the day, doing things for others is one thing, but if you're not enjoying it, it's not going to be worth it for you. I don't think your friends would want you to suffer through it, right? I don't think if I'm doing something I don't like to do, I don't think my friends would want me to suffer through it. They'll prefer if I just dipped out for my own enjoyment to make sure that I'm not putting myself in a difficult position. You shouldn't do that for yourself either. No matter if you're trying to stick it out for your friends or not, at the end of the day, you can find something else you can do with your friends other than torturing yourself. Please guys, don't torture yourselves. At least I've already mentioned, at the end of the last session, we had a talk and decided on me dropping out, and everyone else finished on their own. Although I did have a wish for dropping in for last time after the end, but first DM denied this position, unfortunately. Probably for the better. All I wanted in return is for my character to just vanish without a trace. I even had an idea of how. I want her to be erased, the anchor that held me in this world finally ceasing to exist. Despite everything, I'm still sad about it. Besides me adoring this group, I also loved everyone's characters and my own little warrior cleric, who I wanted only the best for. But alas, it has to end prematurely and badly for us both, because I was stupid. Moral of the story, don't bottle up your feelings with a misguided thought of not letting down others, because it will only let them down even more. And just communicate more about things you're not happy about, since even if they won't change, at least there'll always be a way out for you. No D&D is better than bad D&D, even if it's only bad for you. This is one of those RPG horror stories that doesn't really have a problem player, a problem DM, a problem anything. Just a bad situation, a moment of realization. That kind of rhymes a little bit. But either way, it's a moment to realize and reflect to see if you are actually enjoying the thing that you're doing or not. If the game is not enjoyable or if you're not having fun, it's probably best to not torture yourself just to stick it out for others and just leave and do something you would want to do. Either way, Diana, it's great to see you back, and thanks so much for your story submission. I appreciate it. And a really important lesson to talk about. We need to have more of these abstract ideas to talk about in these RPG horror stories, because I feel like they get nowhere near as much coverage and talk about stuff as, you know, problem player main character syndrome or problem DM being too horny and stuff. Please do take care of yourselves out there, guys. And if you're playing a game right now that you're just not enjoying, consider talking to your DM and other players. And if you just can't stand it at all in any way, consider dipping out and doing something you like to enjoy more. I hope everybody takes care of themselves out there. And with that, that's going to be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales Tomorrow. Bye-bye.